My pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Joe Cimperman. Prior to joining Global Cleveland as its president, Joe Cimperman served 18 years on the Cleveland City Council, where he distinguished himself as a champion of the diverse peoples and cultures of Greater Cleveland. Joe, an immigrant son, grew up in a Slovenian-speaking household in the St. Clair Superior neighborhood of Cleveland. In 1997, he began his first of 7 terms on Cleveland City Council. His diverse ward included the cultures of Asiatown, Tremont, and Ohio City. Joe, a German Marshall Fellow, assumed the leadership of Global Cleveland in April 2016, where he pioneers the causes of immigrants and their new opportunities in Cleveland. He just completed Welcoming Week, which focused on new arrivals to the Cleveland area. Mr. Joe Cimperman.
Thank you so much, and to Your Excellency, the Ambassador, we hope this is one of 50 more trips to Cleveland, which really should be your home away from home. Many of us don't go to Washington, D.C. This is where the real people are, and you are wonderful, and I think you know how much we want you to be here with us. Your Excellency, Ambassador Miroslav Stašak. I'd also like to take a second and acknowledge the person who's filming this, who comes to every one of these international events, Mr. Daniel Hansen, truly the ambassador to the world at clevelandpeople.com. And Dan, thank you so much for promoting and supporting so many of our international communities. I also want to thank Vera and Paul Bjork for your kind invitation tonight. When I came into this exquisite hall, I was reminded of the very first time I ever stepped foot inside. And that was with someone who's here tonight, Councilman Tony Bracatelli, who represented the Slavic Village neighborhood for many decades and continues to be a tremendous leader for all of us in our community. Tony, please stand up. We appreciate you. Thank you, Tony. And because Tony and I were on City Council and it was late in the day, of course we were immediately drawn to where the Pilsner was being served. And one of the things that Tony said before we enjoy some wonderful Czech brew, we went to the basement. And Tony told me the story of how this fantastic, truly international building became something that was so popular, the basement itself had to be addressed and dug out by hand, and Tony was showing me the windows where the dirt went through as people were making sure that this place had enough room for all the people who were here. 125 years ago, before anything that we knew of as a world war, before anything we knew as Soviet, totalitarian, communist oppression, before we would know that our sisters and brothers in Ukraine had what it took and takes to show the world what fighting for freedom means. 125 years. And when I was in City Council and now at Global Cleveland, I just need to close my eyes, and it doesn't matter if I'm in a room full of people who are Czech, or people who are Slovak, people who may be from Congo or Ukraine. They could be people from Afghanistan. And I hear my mother and father, who were born in former Yugoslavia, and their words to me of what it means to be American, of what it means to live in the great city of Cleveland. It's fascinating to me that the Czech story is really the highest and most powerful symbol of what it means to be a part of this incredible republic. If this flag were stretched out, we would see that it has 50 stars on it. But my son, when he was a little boy, said to me, "Daddy, why isn't the blue all filled in?" And I said, "Because the stars are still coming." Because we know that people continue to come to this country. When I was doing a little bit of thought about tonight and the incredible congratulations that each and every one of you are due for holding on to this incredible Czech heritage, I was fascinated at the fact that when the Czech immigrants first came to Cleveland, they had one of the highest literacy rates of anyone, including people who are educated here in the United States. Truly, the Czechs were sending their best. And their best's children and grandchildren are here tonight. When I think about what it took to create this building 125 years ago, the volunteer hours, all the people with their sweat and their tears to make this happen because they didn't have the money but they had the know-how, I think to myself, what was life like back then? If you read the scriptures in the Old Testament, there's the story of Babel, the story of confusion, and people not knowing how to communicate with one another. And when I was younger, one of my teachers said that they thought that when Cleveland was being formed, maybe it was like that place. But I'd like to offer a very different perspective. When this building was being built, places like the Cleveland Metro Parks were being conceived. Organizations like the Cleveland Foundation, the nation's first community foundation, was being formed. And places like the City Club, that stand for democracy and freedom and liberty and free speech, were being formed. And I don't believe in coincidences. I was trained by the Jesuits. I believe that there is a design, and that design was this. At the time when Cleveland had the most number of people from Czechoslovakia, from Slovakia, from Slovenia, from all over Europe and the world, that was when institutions that we have come to rely on, that we still rely on today, were formed. Our golden years were when the bricks were being laid and the windows were being glazed in this building, and we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to you, the Czech community, that continues to show the American public what it really means to join this country. I'm fascinated that when the Czechs came here, they kept up with their gardens and their flowers, because of course they did. I had a chance to visit Prague not long ago, and I saw the absolute attention to beauty, but also this kindness and hospitality, something that you only know if you're at the table of an Eastern European Stara Mama. These are the stories that this room tells. And if these walls could speak, the history that came here, the 3 waves of immigration from the Czech community, over and over again. But the Czech community did something that was very interesting. Oftentimes our international communities get in that house known as America. They get to work at fixing the house. Sometimes they forget to leave the door open. Sometimes they close it, but not here. Not here. This community got here, looked at the door, and said, we're going to take it off the hinges, and we're going to welcome the next generation and the generation after that. And we're going to teach them gymnastics, and we're going to teach them language, and we're going to teach them to appreciate the greatness of the Czech civilization. And so it is. We in this room, the diaspora, I'm willing to bet not one of us came over on the boat, or as my mother would say to me, if you had money on the plane. But it wasn't us. We are the beneficiaries of our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents who've come to this country to understand what it means. And today, as we look at this building 125 years young, we think about all of the reasons why people wanted it to be here. So we can enjoy the beautiful singing and music that we just heard. So we can enjoy the food with one another. So that maybe if we closed our eyes, if our moms and dads and grandparents have been gone for generations, maybe, just maybe, that smell and that sound will remind us of what it was like when we were together at that family table for one of the holidays after we came from church service and we understood without ever saying it the definition of the word joy. That is what this room means. You mean it to each other. You mean it to Slovenians. You mean it to people who are still coming here. And I think we have to remind ourselves of what it took to create this. And when that happens, greatness happens. The Cleveland Agreement the understanding that the Czech people should have their own country, led by them, fueled by them, empowered by them, came within these walls. And I have to think that if the windows and the bricks could talk, they would say that there's a reason people left the old country to come here, and that was so they could go back and continue to fight the oppression and the things that we saw happen throughout the last century, and sadly that we still see happening in places in the Donbass and Crimea. I say this because my day-to-day is to figure out how to get more people to move to Cleveland. How do we get them to come here from places from all over the world, to fill our talent gaps, to go to our schools, to enjoy places like this? Some days the need is very urgent. We know that people want to be here and need to come here. Last week I was in North Royalton with about 100 students who spoke no English, all from Ukraine, whose moms and grandmas, no dads, the dads and grandpas are all still back home fighting, whose moms and grandmas wanted to make sure that their kids would have what they needed as they stayed here for as long as they did. I thought to myself, this is still the place that welcomes people in need. This is still the place that takes people who've been oppressed. This is still the place that means home for people, maybe not your first home, but certainly a home nonetheless. And I think about what's happening in our state and how the amazing company known as Intel has decided to open up shop. Well, guess what? They're in the top 5 companies in the world that hires international talent. And I know what they would do if they had some brilliant Czech innovation. I know what they would do if they had that know-how and that literacy. It would continue to build America. As I sat in the seat and I listened to the singing and our beautiful, beautiful national anthems, with our hands over our hearts, I was reminded that when our incredible Cleveland Symphony Orchestra, considered the best orchestra in the world, first took the stage, 20% of her musicians were of Czech origin. There's not just goodness in this room, my sisters and brothers, Mr. Ambassador. There's greatness. And that greatness comes from the land of where Czech people originate. And so tonight, as we celebrate not just the last 125 years, but the next 125 years, and we think about why did our parents and our grandparents, maybe ourselves, come to this country, we only need to think about the words that we hear and the songs that we sing. We come for hope. We come for freedom. We come for work. We come because we have to. And mostly what we come for is to be with and for one another. My mother used to say to me in Slovenian, Jože, Jože, smira govorite resnici in odite čim prej. And those words translated to you are this: Joey, Joey, when you speak to great audiences like this Czech community, always speak the truth and then leave immediately after. Listen on you.